Yeah, Treylon Burks. This was the guy who has seemingly somehow been locked in as the 101, and it's not quite consensus or unanimous, but it's pretty close.
It's pretty darn close, and a little bit surprising because so many of us for so long have said it's really a wide open field at every single position. But outside of Garrett Wilson getting a couple of number 1 overall spots in those rookie drafts, he seems to have separated himself just a little bit from the rest of the field. And there's so many things to like about him, Matt. One thing that really jumps off to you is his potential after the catch.
Yeah, his versatility is incredible. And the way they get them out there on those little screen passes, they have him run out of the backfield, getting the ball in his hands in space. And then using his strength and that frame and that stiff arm that he has, and that he doesn't really have the burner speed, but he's got that build up speed. I just think if he lands in the right place, think about the way that San Francisco uses Deebo Samuel, these other kind of like hybrid players, not that he's necessarily a hybrid player, but that just lends to me that he's going to be just a huge yards after the catch monster in this league if he lands in the right spot.
He's so big for a guy with that kind of quickness, right? He's got uncharacteristic size, 6'3", 225 pounds. We're going to get those official measurements when the combine comes in just a couple of weeks here. But that kind of size to go with that ability to make people miss in the open field and then overpower people as well is something that just has dynasty managers salivating.
Well, I think we look at that size that you guys are talking about, and we think, and we really do this every year with wide receivers that are that big, right? Like he's the next Mike Evans, but he does not play like he's very different, very different. And what I love about Burks is, and this almost is going to sound like a knock. He's so big, but he plays small, right? Like a lot of the best things about his game, we typically see with smaller wide receivers. Not only his speed, but I mean fluidity in routes, and then Matt, you kind of hit on it a little bit with the Deebo talk. This rushing line, right? 38 carries, 222 yards, and a touchdown as a ball carrier. We've said it before, copycat league, and there's a lot of talk about my guy Wan'Dale Robinson being, maybe he's the Deebo guy. I think it's Treylon Burks that teams are looking at and thinking we can get him the ball in 5 different ways and he can make a play.
And I disagree a little bit on he doesn't play. He plays small. I mean, he has those small skills. Like the first thing I wrote in my notes, the very first thing after watching a handful of games was big and fast enough to play outside, but quick and has enough burst to play inside. And he was using the slot receiver a lot. So you want to get him in space.
And I didn't mean that he doesn't, he takes advantage of his size. He still can go up and get the ball. That's what we want to see. Right. That's what we want to see from those big guys. Obviously take advantage of their size. What I was trying to say is he can do a lot of things that most big wideouts can't do.
Well, let's talk about the cons, because no player comes in fully polished. I know Jamar Chase is probably the guy that I'll get screamed at about on Twitter as people listen to this. But there are some things that make you second guess a play or two from time to time, right, Matt? He rounds off a couple routes from time to time. He doesn't look fully enamored with the play call from time to time when the ball's not coming his way. There are times when you expect him to dominate a corner on even a poorly thrown pass because of a size disparity, because he just towers over the guy, and he just missed times every now and then. There's 2 or 3 of those plays in his final year at Arkansas where I said, wow, I really expected the highlight. On one play especially, I can't remember who they were playing, but he tried to make a one-handed catch when it wasn't necessary, and he ended up dropping it. And it was like, man, that's one of those things where he tried to do too much or wants to be that big-time playmaker. And it just made me think twice about maybe he's not all the way up to that top 5 overall prospect in the NFL draft level. maybe we need to slow down and see where this lands before we get too excited about that upside, which he's dripping with.
Like that plus, like when we say he's not a burner, like if you hear someone, I think I heard this on another podcast, maybe the Dynasty Dummies, they said that if you hear that if he's not a burner, it means you really don't have a whole lot of complaints about him in the NFL. You know, for my negatives, like you said, he rounds off his routes sometimes, Dan, especially noticeable on slants occasionally. So I don't think he's going to be the slant daddy. He's not going to be the next coming of Michael Thomas or whatever, right? You know, I think my biggest concern, and this is not really his fault at all, I think it's just a product of how the offense used him, is that there, at least again, from what I watched, the 10-ish games that I watched from him, there's not a lot showing him, you know, using a lot of variety of techniques to release off the line.
There are situations, as good as he can be, that when teams press him, they go, you know what? We're going to move shade to the inside because you don't have an answer for how to release inside, how to like run an in-breaking route and release inside of a defender who's playing inside shade against you. And he malfunctions. What he ends up doing is he has even a running start, like a 5 or 7 yard head start, and he doesn't have a way to set the guy up. And instead he just tries to run him over.
Because of that strength, they say he's a workout warrior in the gym, and that he can bench everything he wants to bench and all those kind of things. I'm not too worried about the press when it comes to Burks at the next level.
Are you guys worried at all that it doesn't look like he'll be the wide receiver one in the NFL draft? I mean, I know we've got quite a while until that takes place, but in most of the mocks I see, it's either Drake London or Garrett Wilson. For him to be like we talked about earlier, almost locked in at 101, he's not that Jamar Chase guy that's also locked in as the wide receiver one in the class.
But we have classes where Marquise Brown and Henry Ruggs was the number one off the board in the NFL draft, and they were not the 101 in our rookie drafts, you know. So I'm not as concerned about that, I guess.
He's not that kind of burner that doesn't profile as a guy who could become the number one receiver for his team. I didn't know. I thought maybe that's where you were going with the question. Burks has the physicality, the size, the speed, the route running, the hands, all those things to become the number one receiver for his NFL team. So if he gets married to the right offense that will use him properly with the right quarterback and has the draft capital, which I think we all believe is going to be in the first 20 picks of the NFL draft, he has everything that we want for him as a dynasty asset. Now, it's a little early, guys, to start talking about where do we want to see him play, Matt. But is there a specific offense, maybe a type of quarterback? Of course, we want an elite quarterback and all those things. Is there anything that we should be looking for that we want Burks to be associated with when he gets to playing on Sundays?
For me, I wrote down that I think his best fit is a high volume possession receiver and or a yak weapon in a West Coast offense. Landing spots. I mean, I wrote down a bunch of teams. The ones that came to mind at the top. I mean, I feel like almost every team could use him, to be honest with you. But the ones that I kind of came up with as the top options, teams like the Saints, the Jets, the Bears, the Browns, the Cardinals, even the Chiefs, if they want to keep looking for their third option, right? The Colts, like there's just a litany of teams like that need, if not a wide receiver one, certainly a wide receiver two. And in some of those teams need a wide receiver one after what's going to happen to them in free agency.
If you look at the teams in the top half of the draft that are likely, or at least reasonably could use a pick on a wide receiver, Atlanta at 8, Minnesota at 12, Cleveland at 13, and then Philly, I believe, has 15 and 16. You mentioned Cleveland as a landing spot you would be good with. He goes in there and he's the wide receiver one immediately.